I've had so many conversations over the last year where this platform began and where it is right now are two completely different dynamics. This has evolved, this has grown, this has become something that is so much bigger than what I could have ever even imagined. One of the things that I am most grateful for are those initial conversations that I had. There were a series of conversations that I had that were incredibly impactful, that were incredibly meaningful to me. And if you scroll on my page and if you scroll down long enough, you'll find today's guest. And truthfully, I don't even like calling you a guest. You and I talk so much offline and through text message that I think that I actually consider you a friend. I consider you a brother. I consider you to be so much more than just a normal guest. And so, for anyone that is unfamiliar with my guest today, I would like to introduce you to Noel Fenderson. And so, Noel, I want to thank you for your time and coming back on.
Hey man, I'm glad to. I feel the same way about you, Stephen. So cool to see God working in your life, and I'm grateful just to have been a small part of that.
Honestly, I think you've probably been more than just a small part because for anybody that doesn't know, we text occasionally. I have access to Noel, he has access to me, and it has been something that has been invaluable to have brothers that I talk to. When I first launched this platform, it was simply talking to men. It was simply talking to brothers that I wanted to have in what I would call a tribe, in what I would call a community. And so before I say anything else, I want to thank you just for your willingness to be in fellowship with me and to walk in community with me and to just make yourself available. I appreciate you and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate you, man.
Of course, for anyone that is unfamiliar, the way that I got connected with Noel is via his Instagram page, and he has a what I would call unique Instagram handle. And in our first conversation, I remember asking him exactly what it stood for. And so, Noel, in order to begin, I want to begin just with the username and your page and what exactly it means. What does dangerous but good actually mean? And what is the vision or the purpose behind what you're doing?
Yeah, man. So dangerous but good. It is a lifestyle that we like to communicate. It is the perfect picture of Jesus. He is dangerous but good. He's the full
Mhm.
ability, the power to be classified as dangerous, but at the core is good. And so that is the theme that we live by and we want to encourage other people to live by. It's to live a life that matters because of Jesus and that we are as protectors and providers that we're called to be dangerous for the sake of good. And so only because of Christ. So that's kind of the
You know what's interesting about that is I am on your page and your page promotes what I would call three F's. So it's faith, family, and freedom. And I think that there's something that's interesting about those two concepts. Number one, dangerous and good. It's amazing how you merge them together. It's amazing how you combine them together and you describe Jesus as being dangerous, but he's also good. I want to get into a life update and I want to hear what God has been doing in you. But I want to ask two important questions. The first is if Jesus is dangerous, what exactly does that mean? When someone comes to you and they say, how is Jesus dangerous? What does that look like? But also, if he is, let's say, the example of what being dangerous actually is, how does that translate into us as men?
Yeah, great question. And we talked about before our logo, our primary logo mark is a lion, and it actually came, if you remember, from Chronicles of Narnia. And there's this scene where they're talking about Aslan. They say, "Hey, we're gonna go see him. Is he safe?" And the response is, safe. Who said anything about safe? Of course, he's not safe, but he's good. And so really it's an invitation to the mission of God, which, if you look all throughout the scriptures, is anything but this safe,
Yeah.
comfortable lifestyle. And so it's inherently there's danger, there's persecution, there's risk. It takes a lot to live, to be dangerous to the things that are against the faith, right? The three F's: faith, family, and freedom. We want to be dangerous to things that come against that. And so you want to be dangerous to evil. You want to be dangerous to things that affect your family. You want to be dangerous to things that affect your faith and your freedom. And so that's kind of the idea behind it. And you know, Jordan Peterson is the best person that talks about this ability to be dangerous is actually a virtue that if you don't have the ability to be dangerous, then it's not really a virtue because you don't even have the capability to be it, right? And so the what makes it a virtue, what makes it actually something that is unique is you have the ability and the tools to be dangerous, but you choose to be good. And so
Mm.
that's kind of, what I see. Jesus, when you think about God, is all holy and powerful. And when I ask people, hey, who is God? They're going to say things like that. He's powerful. He's all knowing. He's merciful. He's perfect. And it's all these things it's dangerous to evil at the end of the day. The bottom line is at the core, we want to be dangerous to anything evil. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Stephen, but that's kind of the overview of it.
It does, and I don't wanna be the one that reveals this for anyone that is unfamiliar with your page, but if anybody goes to your page, there are certain elements, there are certain components that a man can specifically do, and you recently tagged me in a post that highlights this, that highlights one of those things that a man can do to be dangerous, not only to be a danger to anything that would come against his family, but dangerous against the enemy of our souls that would come against our souls. And so, my question is, if being dangerous is actually a virtue, if being dangerous is actually in and of itself a good thing and a positive thing, what does it take for a man to be dangerous? Or perhaps a better way of asking it, what does it take for a man to be effectively dangerous?
Yeah. There's so many directions we could take this. At the end of the day, it's faith, family, and freedom in that order. And so
Mhm.
you can't be truly dangerous to evil for good without the foundation of Christ. And so Jesus is the one that helps us do that. He's the one that gives us the power when we're weak, and he's strong. You know, the caution that I have to live in the worlds that I live in is not to make it all about you and what you can do and this type A, like, gotta be the best, you can never fail, you gotta, work out, like, and all these things that we promote and we agree with. But the caution is walking that line. Joby Martin says for every mile of road, there's 2 miles of ditch. And so on one hand, it's just this idea that, you know, that the culture has talked about so much of what it means to be a man and the toxic masculinity terms and taking it too far where you're a tyrant, right? And so we just believe that we got the king living in us, and there's this king energy that we are to bring into every situation. And it's only through Christ that that's possible. And within that is holistic. So it is physical, of course, spiritual, it's emotional, it's all of
Yeah.
these things that encompass the whole man or the whole person. And so,
Mm.
is that what you're asking me, my bro? Is that,
Mhm,
I want to
mhm.
make sure I'm answering your question?
You're answering my question, but for anybody that is unfamiliar with your page, so there are two, I don't want to call them prominent themes, but two things that are there. And one of them is the fitness component. But the other one is I would call perhaps the firearms component, and that is learning how to defend, learning how to protect, which I think in and of itself, they make you as a man dangerous physically. They prepare you to be able to protect your wife, to protect your children, to protect your home. And that is a great external manifestation. That is a great reality because I think it's important. I think a lot of men are neglecting their health. I think a lot of men aren't taking the opportunity to train themselves. They aren't going to a concealed carry class. They aren't training themselves on how to use a firearm. They aren't training themselves on how to protect what's most valuable to them. And I think that there is something to be said about that. What's interesting is I had a conversation with a good friend of mine. I'll have to connect you with him. His name is Adam, and we were talking about it. And this is what he said. He said, ask a man to rise up and protect someone who would come after his wife or who would threaten his wife, who would assault his wife, and he will not hesitate to rise up and protect her. He will not hesitate to rise up and defend her. Ask a man to rise up and defend his home. Ask a man to rise up and defend his children. And he will undoubtedly and without reservation do anything and everything to protect his children, to protect his home, to be, as you mentioned, that king of the castle, so to speak. But he went on to say something different. But ask a man to feel a feeling.
Mm.
Ask a man to truly sit with himself and with what he may be struggling with what he may be dealing with, and he does not know how to do it. He does not have the framework. And so you mentioned something about masculinity. You mentioned something about what it means to be a man. So if we could sort of compare this concept of being dangerous, right? Dangerous physically, dangerous spiritually. I really want to understand this component of a man. While he is dangerous in those areas, he is also able to be self aware enough about himself to know when he's perhaps unhinged, to know when he's out of control, to know when his emotions are getting the best of him, to know when he's angry, to know when he's popped off at his wife and he shouldn't have, to know when he's unloaded against his children. So, how important is it for a man to be dangerous, but also to be self aware enough to be able to take care of himself?
Yeah, I love that question. And again, even when you and I were talking offline, that's why I'm so encouraged by you because you're a man who is so self aware.
Mhm.
Because it, like you said, it's so important to be self aware. Like we are protectors and providers. And everybody hears that and they think physical and they think violence, they think, physical protection of the home and all those things you mentioned. But man, what about protecting and providing for your children's hearts? What about protecting and providing your emotional needs of your wife? What about protecting and providing for other brothers who are struggling? And so that's just the awareness piece of knowing who you are, your identity as a man and what that means. Everything is tied back to that. And so your identity, your mission, and your process in your life is so important. And I work with a lot of guys, as do you, who are struggling with those things. And they just, we, most guys, we've never been taught on how to be aware. Like we're to like hide our feelings and fight through and muster up and not show emotion. That's kind of how we're taught. And there's a part of that that is true. We should carry the load a little bit different than our female counterparts should, right? But at the end of the day, we're also commanded to be vulnerable and to share each other's burdens and to know about who you are, right? Like you got to know yourself to help yourself and to help other people, right? And so, yeah, man,
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's really important being self-aware.
There's a verse in Proverbs, and I remember the late David Wilkerson preaching a message, and I forget what the title of the message is, but the verse in Proverbs is a man who cannot control his spirit is like a city with broken down walls. that is vulnerable, that is susceptible. And I think part of that self awareness is being able to control yourself. It's a reason why one of the nine fruits of the Spirit is self control. It's why the verse says, "For God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." Other translations will say self control. They use them interchangeably. And so I can't help but, even in my own life, realize how important that is to be self aware. And it doesn't come easy for men. It doesn't. There have been a lot of times when my defenses have been down. There's a lot of time when my guard has been down. You have to be aware enough about yourself to recognize when those moments happen. It's like Nehemiah, who received report about Jerusalem and the gates were on fire, the wall was broken down. It was in a heap of rubble and ruin and ash, and he was in anguish. David Wilkerson preached another message called The Call to Anguish, where he talks about this burden that Nehemiah had to rebuild the walls. And what I so love about Nehemiah is that there came a point when the enemy, the adversaries, tried to stop the works. They tried to keep the wall from being rebuilt. And what Nehemiah did was he actually stationed people. He had two different cohorts. One was the builder, and the other one was the protector. And while people were building, other people were protecting, and vice versa. But what he also did was he had people that would have a trowel in one hand to do the work, but a sword on their side. So if the enemy came in, they could easily trade the trowel for the sword and they could protect themselves. They could protect the city. They could protect the wall. So here's my question. How would you say, in all of your experience with working with men, how does a man actually protect himself? What can he do to make sure that he's protected emotionally and mentally and spiritually?
Yeah. And I'll always start with identity, mission, and process. And so I walk guys through and I've done some cohorts and I've got another brother that I worked with a lot. And man, we always start with who they are. And so a lot of even Christian guys, we can preach about identity and we can share verses about it, but we don't know how to practically live that out. And like, what does that really mean? Like when you're in a fight with your wife, right? Like, how do you practically live that out? And so identity is super important. Starting there, knowing who you are, whose you are, who God's called you to be, ties into then the mission. And so what specific mission do you have on your life? And so there are missions that we all have as men. If you're married, obviously your mission is to your wife. If you're a parent, your mission is to your kids. Like there's there's missions that we're all called to because we're men of God, but then you also have specific missions that play out in your work and what you're gifted at and what where the Lord has you in different seasons. And then a process of how to live that out. Like that is again going back to the practical, how do you do that? And so if you don't have the bigger picture, then you just kind of aimlessly go through life and a week goes by, a month goes by, a year goes by, and you're like, man, what are we doing? And that's where guys fall into drifting and numb
Yeah.
with life and all the things that we talked about before.
So good. There's so much there, and the identity piece is something that I think is really important because if I'm being honest, I grew up in the church. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I attended and graduated from Bible college. I spent my whole life people pleasing. I spent my whole life performing. I spent my whole life trying to fit other people's expectations of who and what they thought I should be. And I think as a result, I have had probably so many pseudo identities or false images, which is crazy because God says you shall not have any other idol or image. And yet I think there's been so many times when I have not only created a false image in myself and of myself, but I might have been guilty of making that an idol. And I might have been guilty of elevating that to a place where it wasn't healthy. And even right now, I'm realizing the importance of identity, really understanding who we are. I think it's a question that a lot of people, both men and women, are asking. It's the question that you ask when you're looking at yourself in the mirror and beyond getting ready, you're able to hold your gaze, which is uncomfortable if you're not used to it. And you ask the question, who am I? Who am I? And you and I, as believers, you and I, as those who walk with and follow Christ, we know that our identity is in Christ. We know that no matter what type of identity we want to pursue from a secular or worldly perspective, our identity as an individual can never rise above our identity in Christ. He has to be the foundation. If we try and pursue any type of identity out of him, it is going to be a counterfeit identity. And here's the way that I would say it too is if we try and make our personal identity outpace or outgrow our identity in Christ, we are going to find ourselves in an incredibly difficult position. And that identity can be in your job, that identity can be in your business, whatever that is for you. Your identity can be in your marriage. Your identity could be wrapped up as a father. Your identity could be wrapped up in hobbies. But if that identity outpaces your identity in Christ, you're going to put yourself in a different kind of dangerous. You're going to become dangerous in a completely different way because you're first and foremost going to be dangerous to yourself, but
Yeah.
you're potentially going to be dangerous to other people. You're going to become dangerous to your wife, the very person who's you have put your identity in. You're going to eventually become dangerous to her. You're going to become dangerous to your kids. You're going to become dangerous on your job. You're going to become dangerous to your brothers. And that is one of the things that I have realized is that there were times when I was dangerous, but not the type of dangerous that we would call good. There were times when I was dangerous to myself. I was dangerous in my first marriage. I will be the first to admit it. There were times, even in my second marriage, when I know that I was not only a danger to myself, but I was a danger to her. I said things and did things that I wish I could take back, that I look back on with regret. And it is so important for men to understand that it is that there is this counterfeit dangerous that we have to really guard ourselves against because it's what they would call toxic masculinity is the way that I can describe it. That is the only way that I know how to do it is when toxic masculinity is when you first and foremost become a danger to yourself, but you become a danger to those around you. You become a dangerous person to your wife, to your kids, and to your brethren. But what's interesting about that, Noel, is that you have managed to say that it's not only enough for us to be dangerous, but it's also necessary for us to be good. What's interesting about that is that Jesus said there is no one good but the Father, which is crazy when you think about it. And this is the narrative of the rich young ruler. So here's my question is we've talked about the dangerous component, but now I want to shift gears into the good side. So what does that good actually look like if we compare it with how God is good, but also we ourselves strive to be good in his image?
Yeah. And that's exactly right. We are good. We're dangerous but good even. The whole thing, like we're dangerous but good only because he is dangerous but good. And so that's a key component of this whole thing. It's Christ in us. That's the only good thing. All of our good deeds are like filthy rags, right? But if we don't know that, if we don't know our identity and what we're rooted in, then to your point, we're dangerous to all the wrong things, and we're not dangerous but good. And it we become tyrants, or we become passive, and we kind of check out. And so we just don't want to put a weight on other people that doesn't belong. We don't want to put that weight on our wife or our children or our work and tying our identity to those things, because when we fail, it's not if, it's when we fail in those areas. If our identity is tied to those things, then man, it just really affects us. And so dangerous for good is, you think about Jesus in the garden, right? Like, he says, it's not like, if this can be taken away from me, meaning this cup of wrath, like, please, but he says, not my will, but your will. And so we're to be in such alignment with the mission of God that that is the pursuit. And so we are good again, going back to that. How do we do that? Because he is good. We're to pursue holiness because of him. It's him in us. It's this journey that we're on of becoming more like Christ. And so, right, that's the goal. We're made in the image of God, and we're to multiply men and women made in the image of God. And so that's the pursuit. That's the mission that we get invited into in an amazing way.
It's been a while since I've read the book, but John Eldridge is probably one of my favorite authors because he does a lot of work specifically with men. And I don't know if you're familiar with John Eldridge, but he wrote the book The Sacred Romance. He's written other books, Wild by Nature. But one of his books that he wrote, I think accurately describes what you and I are talking about, and that is his book called Beautiful Outlaw, where he talks about Jesus and he paints Jesus as just that, a beautiful outlaw. And here's the other thing: Jesus was savage. He was savage, but he was savage in all the right ways because he did not tolerate legalism. He did not tolerate religion. He did not tolerate hypocrisy. He did not tolerate demonic activity. He did not tolerate sickness. He did not tolerate blindness. And I think through Jesus, we understand what it is like to be that savage person where we don't tolerate these things. We don't tolerate any type of demonic activity. When we see it rising up, we actually take up arms against it. We put on the full armor of God. We understand what Paul said in Second Corinthians when he talked about casting down strongholds and taking every thought captive. And Ephesians 6 when he talks about putting on the full armor. And Jesus was one who did not tolerate. He was tender, he was compassionate, he was loving, he was good, but he didn't tolerate. And so, one of the things that I can't help but wonder, because of everything that you have done with men, have you found that there are specific things that men tolerate in their lives that they know they shouldn't, but for one reason or another, they actually give themselves to tolerating these things?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I see. It really it really goes back to their childhood and how they were brought up. Uh,
Mhm.
there's some incredible research and shows on that even when they're researching a soldier that has been in some really tough stuff, or a police officer, when they go and get some critical incident debriefing or they get trauma therapy, the world would think like, oh, well, it's because of the war, it's because of the battle, the violence. But really, the things that they need healed from happened before they went to war, before they had to choose violence. And so a lot of it is tied back to their upbringing and wounds that they had as a child bringing up. And so that's where I see a lot of what you're asking is back in the past. And so helping guys see that and heal from that and work through that is really important. It flows into every situation because you're kind of alluding to, like, we have created this persona of who we are based off of our life experiences and then what we want the world to see. So really, if we're not careful, we can just wear a mask and you don't really know the people. They're just putting on their best version of themselves. That's why, we've talked about before, social media is very dangerous if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And so it's really, I keep coming back to identity. It's the identity, knowing that identity, healing from wounds and trauma, knowing who you are, and then how do you live that out is really what I'm passionate about.
So along the lines of identity, along the lines of knowing who you are, let me ask this question. Who is Noel Fenderson?
Man. So Steven, that I love you for asking that, man, because we talk about this offline, and I know we've had so many conversations about this kind of stuff. But for me, like, again, it goes back to like my identity is in Christ. And so I'm a child of God, I'm a son of God. And coming from my wounds of my past of not having an earthly father, that really used to affect me and how I played out and lived my life. And so knowing that, knowing who my identity is now, and that I have the mission of being a husband and a father and a leader to help men work through these things as a coach and counselor and chaplain. And so, man, I'm grateful for you asking that because I really pray that this helps someone listening is that who you are, like if your identity is in a husband and all of a sudden your wife says something that attacks that and makes you feel like you're not a good husband, well now you're responding out of that person, that identity
Well,
that's not real. And so now we have an argument and you're arguing based off that child that you're fighting, right? You're not really, if you're rooted in your true identity, then that's not going to affect you. Same with a parent. If all your identity is wrapped up in being a good parent, well, what happens when you fail? Which
mhm,
is then now it's attacking your identity. I work with a lot of guys in military and police. Their identity is profession. What happens? Can't wear the badge anymore, right?
mhm,
So you see
mhm,
how we attach our identity to all these wrong things, and so I
mhm.
say all that to say, like, that's how it's why you have to know who you are, whose you are, man.
What's your marriage and your home like? You're a husband and you're a father. Like, what's your marriage to your life like, and what's your home like?
Yeah, man. By God's grace, I married an incredible woman, Brittany.
Mm.
We have 4 kids, and so our home is a beautiful, chaotic mess filled with grace and, love
Yeah.
and fun and
Yeah.
man, and so, yeah, we're on a journey and we're in this pursuit, and I've began to fall in love with the process of that. And so, yeah, that's a beautiful mess, man, is what they say, right?
A beautiful mess. The fact that you can even include those 2 words in the same sentence is, I don't know if it's ironic, scary, or sad at the same time, maybe a combination of all 3. Beautiful chaos, beautiful mess, but yet that is directly attributed to the God that we serve, because he knows how to make both a reality. He knows how to actually make both, going back to the concept of good, he knows how to make beautiful chaos actually become good. He knows what it's like to be able to allow the, and to your point, I was thinking about Job, right? And Job had just lost everything, and he had lost his kids, he had lost his possessions, his physical body was attacked, and he had sores and boils, and he was scraping himself with pieces of pottery, and his wife said something, curse God and die. And now if a lot of men heard their wives say that to them, it would have ignited World War III. They would have responded, especially in the age in which we're living in right now. We don't know anything about Job's childhood, his teenage years, but let's put it in modern context. If your wife tells you to curse God and die, you're going to have some thoughts about that. You're going to have an opinion about that. You're going to perhaps not be sure how to respond to that, whether you respond from that inner child that you have, whether you respond from that place in time where you were frozen when the hurt or the pain or the trauma occurred. And I think a lot of times one thing that I'm finding is I wonder who's responding and who I'm interacting with, the man or the boy, the
Yeah.
woman or the girl, because it's something that I think is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Jonathan Majors and Megan Good appeared on Lecrae's podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it, but one of the things that they said, what if we just realized that we were all young boys in the bodies of men and young girls in the body of women, and we all realized that we just needed to be loved, and sometimes we just needed to be hugged. Sometimes we just need to know that someone is there. And I think it's being able to recognize that. And I think that in addition to self-awareness, I would also say discernment is something else that's needed. You need to be able to discern which version of Brittany you're actually interacting with, right? You need to discern even which version of Noel you're interacting with. And one thing that I found about parenting, even though I never had any biological kids myself, is that they can be a mirror. And if you're not careful, you can parent from your womb because they are going to project to you parts of you that might not be healed. They're going to project to you and reflect back to you maybe parts of your childhood. And then that's why the question of who do they take after is so important, because I'm convinced that that question, who do they take after? Most of the time, it's not asked with a good context associated with it. Most of the time, it's associated with if they're misbehaving or if they're outspoken or if they're sarcastic or if they have an attitude or if they lie or if they do all of these different things. And I think that's why it's so important for us to recognize which version is interacting with the world and the need to be discerning. Discernment of spirits is not solely based on discerning the spirits of others. It's discerning our own spirit as well. Testing the spirits is not just testing the spirits of others, it's testing your own spirit. And one thing that I have found is that I am horrible at interrogating myself. I am absolutely atrocious with it. And then when you bring in the cross examination that comes from the son, who not only brings his own judgment, and when I say judgment, I better rendition is probably his assessment. He
Mm.
brings his own assessment. And what this looks like in real time, you have a reputation that you're alive. You have a reputation that you have everything good, but yet you're dead. You have a reputation that you have all these good works, but yet you have left your first love. And his assessment is sometimes different from our assessment. And sometimes coming face to face with his assessment of us and his inventory, because that is what each of the letters to the seven churches represents, is it represents a heavenly inventory of their existence. And what would happen if Jesus were to write a letter to Noel, or if he wrote a letter to Stephen? What would that letter say? I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but as we're having this conversation, I'm trying to picture it. You know, what's really interesting? I am thinking about, even though this isn't the voice of God, and I understand that. So before anyone pops off with what I'm about to say, I know this is not the voice of God with this. I'm thinking about plugging into ChatGPT based on everything you know about me, everything I said to you. If Jesus were to write a letter to me about me, what would that letter say?
Mm.
Because I'd be curious. I would be curious to see how it would present itself, because it is the reason why people will ask it to write an unhinged bio about themselves. Is basically you're asking ChatGPT to roast you, but instead of asking ChatGPT to roast you, what if you ask Jesus to examine you? What if you ask Jesus to, just like David, search my heart and try me and see if there be any wicked way in me or any anxious thought inside of me? I think that there's something to be said about that. And we have to invite him. And in order to be self-aware, you have to invite the interrogation. You have to be willing to invite that. The only way to be truly self-aware is to be taught by him, is to be taught by the Spirit, is to allow him. Who can know the mind of a man but the Spirit? Who can know the heart? The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked, which means we're going to need a guide. We are going to need a navigator. We're going to need one that shows us. And I desperately need it. I desperately need it, which is why I hate when people say, follow your heart or trust your heart or trust your feelings.
Yeah.
I don't think there's probably bigger lies than those two expressions there, which is a whole nother subject that we could have. But along the lines of you, along the lines of your life, Brittany, along the lines of your four kids, man, I can't help but wonder what God has been doing in your life over the past I think, years since we've talked. What has he been doing in you personally? What has he been doing in your marriage? What has he been doing with Dangerous but Good?
Yeah, man, I would sum it up to bring full circle everything you just said. The grace and love of God has been the biggest thing that I've just been marinating on for a long time now and been really aware of God's kindness. You know, the kindness of God leads us to repentance, right? And so, like you, Stephen, you said it, and I really resonated with what you said that, man, I'm really prideful and I really am on a treadmill of performance and I'm a recovering Pharisee. I I've realized that like I all this earning and striving to earn God's love from a little boy that had no father. And so, man, I would just say that the Lord's shown and revealed how bad I really am. And I
Yeah.
think that the cool thing about everything you just said, and that's examining and test yourself to see if you're in the faith type mentality, is man, once we can admit that and realize how bad we really are, increases the love and grace of the Father and so much more of what Jesus did for us.
Yeah.
He drank the full cup of wrath, right? God refers to his judgment as a cup of wrath. It's this visual picture. And Jesus said, man, if you could take this cup from me, is there any other way? It's, but if there's not my will, but yours. And so, and he did it. He took that cup that we deserve. And so God's
Mm,
grace when I fail as a husband, as a father, as a leader, man, I just been stepping into that, how much he loves you and me.
mm,
It's easy. There, you mentioned Lecrae. There's an incredible episode with him and Francis Chan. And Francis was talking about, man, it's easy for us to say we're crazy about God, but it's hard to say he's crazy about us. And that's him to a book that he wrote with his daughter, Beloved, which I highly recommend. And so,
mm,
man, that has stemmed into, to answer the rest of your question, my home and my ministry and just the grace that God has where I'm able to sit with guys that have messed up big time. And they have said, man, there's a lot of conversations I have with guys start at a coffee shop or online. And they typically say, hey, man, I really messed up. And so that's pretty common. And so I'm able to sit across from them and say, hey, though I have not done the same thing physically that you may have done, I'm just as guilty internally. And so the grace of the Lord has made me really empathetic in that way. And yeah, man. So that's a long answer to your question, but God's grace and his love has been the biggest theme of my life the past year since we really got into this a year ago.
You know what's interesting? You said something while you were talking, and I resonate with it so much. And hi, my name is Stephen. I'm a recovering Pharisee.
Mm,
Hi, my name is Stephen. I am recovering from hypocrisy. There is an artist that released a song back in 2022. His name is Temitope, and the title of the song is called Pharisee and Me. And I want to read the lyrics. I
yeah.
love in theory, but not in practice. Am I worshiping you if I worship for status? Forgetting the ones lost in the margins. Because I focus too hard on the laws and the doctrine, neglecting the important things in my life, ignoring those here right before my eyes. Change my heart, change my mind, break down the stone, break down my pride. The Pharisee in me is falling to its knees, begging you for mercy, begging you to please change my heart. Think I'm full, but my soul starved. Busyness leaves my spirit parched. I'm desperate for the bread of life and living water that satisfies. Jesus, won't you sit and dine with me? Your healing words are everything I need. Change my heart, change my mind, break down the stone, break down my pride, the Pharisee in me is falling to its knees, begging you for mercy, begging you to please help me live out what I sing, not just empty melodies. My heart cries out humbly, Lord, I need you. Let your justice start with me. Pour out mercy to these streets. My heart cries out humbly, Lord, I need you.
So good.
I'm going to let that sit for 5 to 10 seconds. I love in theory, but not in practice. Am I worshiping you if I worship for status? Forgetting the ones lost in the margins because I focus too hard on the laws and the doctrine, neglecting the important things in life, ignoring those here right now before my eyes. Lord, won't you change my heart, change my mind, break down the stone, break down my pride. The Pharisee in me is falling to its knees, begging you for mercy, begging you to please change my heart. Such an incredible song that I'm probably going to listen to after you and I get off. But here's my question to you in light of what I just read. What in everything that I just read resonates with you?
I think to bring it all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, the self-awareness piece is so important. And for us to admit that that's true in all of our hearts, deep down inside, that, I just love, the freedom in Christ that Paul talks about. How many guys and girls, how many people do you know that are living free, truly free? And
Yeah.
so I know in, the Bible Belt where I'm at, where I'm on like the belt buckle, it's not common. And so man, I resonate with all those words because it's all me, and it increases the love of God even more because in spite of that being true, he still loves you. That is amazing. Like in our sin, he died for us and he loves us. And so insert the gospel in this, please. Like praise God. Like who can save me? This shirt is our next drop for Dangerous But Good. We release themed drops with an idea behind it. And so to bring it to that, if I could for a second, not to sell this, because I care way more about the lifestyle of it, but it is this wrestle of the war within us that we all have.
Mm,
And Paul describes it so well in Romans 7. He's like, man, why don't I do the things that I want to do? And why do I do the things I don't want to do? And he says, what a wretched man I am, but praise be to God,
yeah.
right? That he loves us in spite of that. And that in spite of this guy that we are, in spite of this war between the flesh and the spirit, Jesus is
Mm,
there in the midst of it. And so
mm.
we're, you know, man, it just every time I think about it, I'm just in awe of God's love. And so I pray that you feel that. I pray people listening feel that and know that no matter what you've done or where you're at right now, God loves you and his love does not change and it's not based off of what you do or don't do. So yeah, appreciate that reminder, Stephen.
That's so good. I'm actually going to listen to that song when we finish because the interesting thing about that song is that the first time I heard it, someone sent it to me because it was basically sent as an accusation. It was sent as an accusation that, listen, there's a Pharisee inside of you that you're being hypocritical. And as you and I were talking, I was reminded of it. And I can't say that they were necessarily wrong. I definitely think it was meant to be more of an attack and an assault than anything else. I don't think it was sent with the best of intentions, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't still true nonetheless. And so, Noel, one of the things that I've started doing in these conversations, and this is a far cry from our first conversation that we had, but I'm calling it flip the script. And what flip the script means is that for the majority of these conversations, I'm the one that's seemingly in the driver's seat. I'm the one that's asking the questions. and the other person is answering, responding, we're dialoguing back and forth. But when flip the script happens, the other person gets in the driver's seat and the other person has the opportunity to ask a question. So based on everything that you know about me, from private conversations and text message to what you see on my page to what we've talked about today, what question do you have, or what are you yourself curious about that you want to ask me?
Man, Steven, I care about you. I love what you're doing. I'm encouraged by you, what the Lord is doing in your life, and your heart is really cool. Man, I guess I would just love to know, like, man, what drives you? What drives
Mhm.
Steven? And what is your purpose? What is your mission? Man, I'd love to know that. Love to hear your answer to that.
I am first and foremost a son. I'm a son of the living God. I am a disciple and a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm one who, like you said earlier, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of sin? I understand that I'm not perfect. I understand that I'm deeply flawed and that I am a sinner that is saved by grace. I recognize that I am still under construction. Like Billy Graham said, I am still under construction. So if anyone comes and interacts with me, bring your hard hats and bring your hammers, bring your saws, bring your screwdrivers, bring anything that you would like, because chances are, if you're in my life, you're going to be involved in the construction process. And especially if you're closer to me than other people perhaps would be. As far as what drives me, honestly, community is what drives me. And I was never the type of person to even remotely think that. I spent 15 years in a marriage avoiding and shunning community, shunning brotherhood, and conversations like this were non existent. What drives me and what my purpose is number one, being in community with other people like you, having brothers around me that are like David when he was in the cave, and those brothers that came alongside of him during those dark and desperate moments would end up being the brothers that would fight alongside him when he was king. And whether I'm in the cave or whether I'm in Ziklag or whether I'm in Hebron or whether I'm in Jerusalem, wherever I may be, it's recognizing that I am striving to connect men and striving to connect brothers. But also, with that being said, I'm also gives me purpose is creating community of people that feel safe, people that feel seen, people that feel heard, people that can come to this table, so to speak, without feeling judged. The best way to describe it is like Mephibosheth, who was Jonathan's son, who was dropped when he was a child and he became lame in both of his legs. And yet he was given a seat at the king's table despite his condition, recognizing that this is not a polished table. This is not a place of perfection, but you can come with whatever you have, whatever flaws, imperfections, scars, wounds you have a place here. My purpose is to have these conversations and to connect people, to really allow people the ability to find healing, find wholeness, to discover who they are again. I love talking to people about identity. I love talking to people about purpose. I love talking to people about healing. I love talking to people all of this. So what gets me out of bed every morning, honestly, the more conversations I have in a given day, the more excited I am, because I'm like, I love people. Genuinely love people. I genuinely love connecting and interacting. This conversation, if I'm being honest, Noel, is probably one that has more impact and more meaning for me than every other one that I've had in recent months, because you and I talked, I don't, before all of this, you and I talked before I'm doing what I'm doing now. And I appreciate that. And that's why this conversation, I think, is so relevant, is because it I don't want to say it showcases how good God is.
Mm.
It showcases what he is able to do, what he's able to do through surrender, what he's able to do through sacrifice, what he's able to do even when you feel like you don't have a clue what you're doing. And even if you feel if you don't have a clue where you're going,
Mm.
You are still putting in the work. You're still putting in the reps. Like if you were working out, you're still putting in the reps. You're still showing up. Gym. These conversations are like a gym for me, where I'm putting in the reps. I'm putting in the workout. And for that, I'm grateful.
Mm. So good, man. I'm so glad you shared that because I think people will love to hear that about you and hear what drives you and motivates you. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I just started doing that. Some people have more than one question, and but I like doing that because it basically gives the person the ability to ask me anything. And I've asked Christians and non-Christians that question alike. And I think the first person I did it with was someone in New Zealand, and her question was, "What is your soul's purpose?" It just interestingly enough in line with what you just asked. So it's amazing. It's almost as if God is asking me, "What is your purpose?" And I think what's great about that is for the longest time, I didn't feel like I had purpose. And yet now I finally feel like I'm stepping into my purpose. I finally feel like there's a song that I have on a reel, not a reel, but a post on Instagram, and the song is Step Into Your Power. And I feel like I'm stepping into my power. I feel like I'm stepping into that danger and I'm stepping into that good. I'm stepping into the dangerous and I'm also stepping into the good. That's where I'm at. And it feels great to be able to say that. It feels great to be able to have a conversation like this with you, which I think is why I resonate so much. Because I remember our first conversation when we talked about dangerous but good. And I remember at that time, coincidentally, that was when I heard Ren Collective's song for the first time. And I remember talking to you about that in that conversation. And I may listen to both those songs. As I drive home, I'm going to listen to Pharisee and Me, and I'm going to listen to Ren Collective, and then I'm going to listen to the song that I listened to over and over and over again after my dad passed away. So I think I have a little playlist going on. But
Love it, man.
no, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming back on and having the conversation with me. I appreciate you probably more than I appreciate everyone that has a conversation with me, but I appreciate those that have been willing to walk with me to some capacity, not only off camera, but in real life. So I want to say that I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you, and you are a brother and you are a friend.
I feel the same way about you, Steven. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. For anyone that is unfamiliar, his Instagram handle is dangerous but good. So I would encourage you, go ahead, find his page, view what he's doing. It is absolutely incredible. I'm going to put in this shameless plug, like, comment, share, repost everything that he does. And if you want to get a little glimpse of that, you can go to my page. He tagged me in a post on my page. You'll get an even better idea. And so, with that, I'm going to encourage everyone to live dangerously, but also live good.